It's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first international bilateral visit since he assumed office for a third time, a move that reflects the importance that India attaches to its relationship with Russia. PM Modi landed in Russia this evening to participate in the 22nd India-Russia Annual Summit, which is taking place tomorrow. In a rare gesture, the first Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, Denis Manturov, accompanied PM Modi till the hotel from the airport in the same car. He attended the private dinner hosted by President Vladimir Putin. On the 9th of July, the two leaders will hold bilateral talks, and the Indian Prime Minister is expected to address the Indian diaspora as well. Now, Prime Minister Modi and President Putin, remember, have met a total of 16 times since the Indian Prime Minister assumed office in 2014. But this is the first meeting in person since the Russia-Ukraine war began in February 2022. On the agenda this time are defense, energy, space, as well as people-to-people ties. But one of the most pressing concerns would be the situation of Indian nationals who are stranded in Russia. About 20 to 30 Indians were reportedly duped into fighting for the Russian army at the front lines. PM Modi is likely to bring this up when he meets with President Putin. Remember, PM Modi's visit comes amid persistent sanctions by the West against Russia and the Russian proximity to China, and in a world whose geopolitics as well as geoeconomics has changed since the two wars. What happens in these 2 days is going to be hugely significant. Let's try and understand this and decode for you what Prime Minister Modi's visit to Russia really means. On the broadcast, I'm joined by BenAris. He's the founder and editor-in-chief of BNE and the former bureau chief for Daily Telegraph in Moscow. I'm also joined by Rajan Kumar, associate professor at the School of International Studies in JNU. Good evening, namaskar. Welcome to both of you gentlemen. Ben, let me start with you first. It is a crucial visit by the Indian Prime Minister, one that is coming for the first time after the Russia-Ukraine conflict began. How do you see this really? What does it mean for both the countries?
It's multi-levels, isn't it? India and Russia's relations have always been very good, and they continue to be good, and they're now connected even more so by business, in so much as India has taken over a large chunk of the oil exports that used to go to Europe and have now been sanctioned and are now arriving in India. So this is a significant trade. Some $40 billion a year worth of trade have come flooding into India. But at the same time, there's this growing geopolitical tension between the East and the West, Moscow and Washington. And so the point of this meeting, I think, is to ruble exchange mechanism is a key problem that needs to be sorted out. But at the same time, I think Modi is emerging as the grown-up in the room in so much as that he's the one who's trying to moderate between the two sides, because from this emerging group, BRICS, India is the one that still retains the really good relations with both Russia, China, and with the West. And so it can play a key role here. Just how that will play out remains to be seen.
Sure. Professor Rajan, it's interesting because just ahead of Prime Minister Modi's visit, the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson had said that the West, and particularly the United States, is jealously watching this situation, this visit, and monitoring this situation, clearly reflecting the kind of, tensions amid which the Indian Prime Minister is making this visit to Russia. Also, of course, we saw President Xi Jinping meet with President Putin just weeks ago. How does this really play out when we talk about India navigating its way through these tensions?
I think, Shreya, thank you for having me here first. This visit is important for several reasons. In my view, the first and the most important thing is the timing. That after Prime Minister, he became Prime Minister for the third time, elected for the third time, and then his first visit to a foreign destination, except the Italy thing, which was for multilateral summit. This is the first bilateral visit that Prime Minister is making. Usually, as you know, that Indian Prime Minister used to go to one of the neighboring countries in South Asia. But this is the first. This is happening after 2019. That time he went to Vladivostok, and now he's went there. And the important thing is that the summit meeting, which is the best or the highest form of institutionalized cooperation between the two countries, that meeting and that the summit was not happening since 2021. So first because of disruption of the COVID, and then because of the Russia-Ukraine war, etc. So now this is a kind of a resumption of the dialogue at that summit level. And some concerns were mounting, especially from the Russian circles, especially within the Russian circles, that India is not prioritizing its ties with Russia. So Prime Minister Vijay will kind of assuage that Russian apprehension. It will dispel the idea that India is not prioritizing its ties with Russia. In fact, India is very serious about its ties with Russia. And this visit is also important because of two other reasons. First is that the NATO summit is taking place in Washington, and despite that, India decided to, Prime Minister Modi decided to visit there. So India is not concerned about the Western sanctions or Western pressure as far as Russia is concerned. India was careful in Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and in my view, one of the reasons why Prime Minister didn't go to Astana just a few days ago, it was kind of trying to send a message to the international community and to Russia that India's priority is Russia and not China. So this visit is extremely important. But there are other substantive issues which are going to be discussed between the two countries. First is they'll start the dialogue from where they left off in 2021, in which now the other issues have become important.
Okay.
For instance, from the Indian perspective, this trade imbalance is a major issue. As you know, that the trade between the two countries is roughly $64 billion. And out of that, India's export is only $4 billion. So just imagine the kind of trade imbalance that has been created. So India will insist that Russia should invest some amount of that this money in India. And also, India will also request probably to kind of pay in through the barter, where we can export more products to Russia. Second is defense cooperation.
Okay.
As you know, that India even today the closest defense partner is Russia, and we import a lot of products from Russia. Spare parts that is being delayed because of Russia-Ukraine war. S-400 that is being delayed. So these are some of the issues, and then energy import. That is another issue. Connectivity, international north-south transport corridor is
sure. I
another
think
important
energy
issue.
cooperation is something that has peaked between the two countries in the last few years, Professor Rajan, and something that also has contributed to the kind of bilateral trade that the two countries have seen in the last few years. In fact, surging much ahead of what they had set the target for in 2025. But that target has been achieved much before that year in 2023-24. But Ben, this was about India trying to sort of strengthen its relationship with Russia for more reasons than one. But for Russia, in strengthening its relationship with India, do you think this is also a kind of signal, a message that Russia wants to send out to the world, specifically the United States, that, you can have as many sanctions imposed upon us. We have countries that are our friends, that support us. And also the fact that it doesn't want to be seen just as a country that is close to China. It also wants other countries to be in support of it, at least, on paper, when it comes to a sort of display of strength to the Western world.
Absolutely. And it's not just on paper. I mean, if you throw your mind back to the original UN resolutions to condemn Russia's invasion, there were some 144 countries that condemned Russia. But then you fast forward to the Swiss Peace Summit that was held just 2 weeks ago. And that was another attempt to renew the mandate of Russia's isolation. And Ukraine, Americans invited hundreds of countries. In the end, only 78 turned up. And most of those were Western or Western affiliated. And the goal of that conference was to show how isolated Russia was. And it was a failure because what it managed to do was to show how divided the world was, and that the whole global south, emerging markets, whatever you want to call them, were not on board with the sanctions and didn't attend the summit. In India's case, it's an extremely low-level delegation, not even at minister level. And so this meeting is important because Russia's signaling that, it's been forced to remake its relations. It's definitively broken with the West, with Europe and the States. And it has to remake its relations, or turn the focus of its relations to the global South, to Southeast Asia, Southern Asia, Africa. And so those relations have been there before, but now they're very warm. And I think a lot of those countries actually quietly agree with both Putin and Xi Jinping of China's view that, the world is dominated, this unipolar domination by the American hegemony, and that actually it should be a multipolar world where all the countries can participate. And unfortunately, up until now, the Western markets have been dominating the whole process. They dominate all the international institutions. And these young, vibrant, growing, and soon-to-be global superpowers of countries like India, they want more say. They want their seat at the table. And so in that sense, Putin, Russia, and India's relation is a key part of that, but it comes as a package. And I think the really interesting thing about this meeting is up until now, most of those relations between Russia and somewhere like India have been bilateral. But now they've become multilateral, framed in these new organizations like the BRICS organization, like the newly expanded G20, which include or have a token presence of Western institutions. And these countries are now coming together. And the whole point of this visit is to deepen the relationships between Russia and India based on trade, based on energy, but to do it in a multilateral context as well. So this will also include China, and China becomes part of this group. And it's not bilateral relationships or even trilateral anymore. It's this antipole against G7 that's dominated the world, that's growing up and not necessarily aggressive. And again, I think India's role in this whole process is very positive because it's the bringer of peace, the messenger of peace. And Modi has made it very clear that he doesn't want to do the aggressive militaristic sort of stance that China and Russia are tending towards, but wants to base this on mutual advantage, mutual investment, mutual trade, and tone down the tensions. So, of course, part of the talks that they're about to go into will include some sort of formula or approach to peace in Ukraine, bringing the conflict to an end. But at the end of the day, I think that's on Putin's shoulders, and particularly on Zelensky. And we had Orban, the Hungarian prime minister, in Moscow earlier this week or the weekend saying, let's do a peace deal, let's start the process, to which the European elite were outraged and reacted, condemned.
Pretext of jobs and education, and they found themselves at the front lines in this war. Prime Minister Modi is perhaps going to talk about this. Do you think there will be some sort of headway in this concern that India has?
Well, of course, without any doubt. I think this issue has been raised by the External Affairs Minister of India through tweets and on other platforms. And this is definitely going to be discussed when Prime Minister Modi meets President Putin. And I think Russia should not have any problem because 20 or 30 soldiers here, 30 people here and there, that will not make any difference so far as Russia's Russia's war with Ukraine is concerned. So, kind of cooperation that we have with Russia, Russia will definitely consider India's request, and that is certainly going to be discussed when Prime Minister Modi meets President Putin tomorrow.
Also, just the fact, Professor Kumar, that people-to-people ties have been strong over the past several decades when it comes to India and Russia. We also had, the Indian diaspora welcome Prime Minister Modi today. We had Russian children dancing on Bollywood numbers. So that clearly also reflecting the kind of bilateral relationship that the two countries have shared, and something that they can work upon and strengthen in the near future as well.
Definitely, and I'm one of the beneficiaries because I've been visiting Russia for the last 20 years, several times, and some of my family members are also there. We have a very strong Indian community in Russia. Around 20,000 people are there. We have had traditionally during the Soviet times had a very strong relationship. We had very strong soft power in terms of the impact of Bollywood, etc., and also yoga and the way the exchanges between the students of different universities used to take place. We have very strong ties as far as the cultural relations concerned. I think if you visit the Western capitals, one place where if you talk to any person and they'll feel very nostalgic about India, and that is Moscow and St. Petersburg. So people think very highly of India, and they are very welcoming so far as Indians are concerned. Of late, soft power got diminished, and China has become very active there. China has become very powerful, but India is trying to rebuild its soft power, rebuild its cultural ties with Russia, and there is no reason why we should not progress. As far as cultural ties between the two countries are concerned.
Okay. All right, we'll leave it there. I'm sure Ben has a story or two from the love for Bollywood that Russians have, but that for someday else, Ben. Ben and Rajan Kumar, thank you very much to both of you gentlemen for joining us on the show tonight and sharing your perspective and helping us understand the significance of the Indian Prime Minister's visit to Russia. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.